So here we are. It's a beautiful Sunday in Charlotte. It's a great day to make something beautiful, I hope. So these scraps came from a stool I built, and instead of throwing them in the waste bin, I thought, wow, maybe I could make something with them. And that was the inspiration for this clock. Now we're going to see if I can actually do it. Of course, I have some plans, and you might be thinking, this guy spends more time making plans than he does making things. Well, that's probably true. I just don't do things without planning them out. So something like this, I'm just going to rough it out on the bandsaw and then clean it up on the disc sander. Put a 3/8 inch dado in. I set it at 3/8 of an inch high. I tested a piece. "16" square, then I can start making the grooves. You may not be able to see this very well, but I've marked the lines out on 30-degree increments. I use this drawing, so basically I just marked the end points and connected them. I'm keeping this a square, even though it's going to be a circle, but I want to work with it as a square because it's so much easier to work with squares than it is circles, and then cut the circle after I get the grooves cut. Well, this was way more difficult than I thought it would be, but I think this will work. You can see I cut this slot way deeper than I should have. I should have double checked the depth, but I didn't. So that's way deeper. I will just glue in some spacers to bring that up level. And the middle part goes away. There will be a cherry circle part to the clock. So I think it's all going to work. The reality is there's just so much difference between a CAD drawing that's infinitely perfect and what you can make on a table saw, or at least what I can make on a table saw. I'm sure lots of people could do a much better job of this than I have, but these are the skills I have at this point. This is the first mock-up. I've cut these grooves in the bottom of the piece and grooves in the backing, so there'll be a spline that fits in there. These dowels, of course, they will go into this back and into the top, and they'll be cut shorter, so the face of the clock will be down here. The center of this will get cut out, and ultimately this piece will become a circle on these plans. Let's see how it turns out. I have this scrap of maple. It actually has the design for my dust collector extension arm. I'm going to square this up and then start ripping 3/8 inch splines. So here's a little test and adjustment. Of course, all of this will be cleaned up. But the splines, this is kind of the original design. You can see where the line is. So the spline comes up to the dowel. But I think I like this better. I want to see just a little bit more of the spline. And I kind of like this being rounded and just coming up and touching the dowel. And I like the fact that with the spline there's a little shadow line between the piece and the base. So I think the final version is going to be kind of like that. Ready to cut the center hole. At this point, this is something that I really don't want to screw up. A 3-inch hole saw. This is the kind with a carbide tip held down in place, and I've already cut one to make sure the process will work, and halfway through one way, halfway through the other way to make sure I don't get tear out. Well, that didn't work. I'm going to call that the end of the day. It's been about a week since I broke this in half and decided I needed to think a little bit. All these are long because the idea was I was just going to slide this down until it hit these spacers. Then I was going to cut the excess off so that there were maple circles, 12 of them. So this really started as a design decision. At first I had 4, which would do the job just fine. And 4 would have worked much more easily. But I thought 12 would be kind of cool because it's a clock. But the difference between getting 4 dowels that are snug in place and 12 is huge. So just hitting them with a hammer is clearly not going to work. And that's an aesthetic decision I made, but it clearly has an impact on the building of the piece. That's one of the things I enjoy about designing and building things is, otherwise I wouldn't have really known, I wouldn't have had that input as to how much more difficult I made it to build by making that design decision. I still think the decision's right, and I'm certainly not going to remake this, so I have to come up with a solution. I at first thought, well, I'll just drill the holes out a little bit bigger. I special ordered a 7/16 drill bit, which is, one size larger than these. But that creates kind of a sloppy situation. So I'm not sure I like that solution. First, I need to check something. These are not perfectly spaced, even though, I tried, but they're not perfectly spaced. I drilled these holes directly through here, so I know that this fits this. It's possible I thought I'd kept track of the placement, but it's possible I didn't. So the first thing I have to check is, do I have this in exactly the right place? There's only 1 out of 12 positions that it actually fits. I realized the dowels don't really need to go all the way through. I could cut them short. If they go in 1/4 of an inch with glue, it will be way strong enough. Then I can just put maple plugs on the other end and it's fine. I'm going to put a maple plug on the top, which creates to some extent the illusion of it going all the way through, which is not particularly authentic, but sometimes you just have to make things work. And there's an added benefit in that this plug is a side grain plug, whereas these would be end grain. End grain becomes a lot darker when you put oil on it because it soaks up all the oil, so there's very little contrast. This side grain will have contrast with the cherry, so I think that will actually be better, and we just won't tell anybody that this is a lie. I'm using hide glue. It should act as a lubricant and it shouldn't swell the part. Checked the alignment, and of course I did have it wrong, so that was one problem. Hopefully this time will go better. So the fun part is the plugs. That's going to work. I always think it's cool when something like this that doesn't look very well done, and then you hit it with a sander. It's really nice. I'm going to glue these on with hide glue. I have marks so I know where the glue goes. I have this spacer so that you see a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that's kind of cool. So the best part is always finishing the front of the clock. I think the contrast to the cherry and the maple is turning out pretty nice. here it is, and it actually works. This is the correct time. I think it turned out pretty cool. The cherry parts will darken over time, so the difference between the cherry and the maple will actually increase. In a way, I'm lucky to be able to go down these weird rabbit holes, like spending so much time trying to save some pieces of wood and making a cool clock. If you enjoy these stories, please like and subscribe. Cheers.